Welcome to Charts Today. My name's David Linton, and today's edition for Monday the 23rd of January comes to you from Verbier in Switzerland. And I start by looking at the dollar index. We're still below the cloud here. We've had quite a lot of choppy sessions in the last several weeks, really. We've been just falling back here. We're above the cloud on both the medium and long-term charts, but the short-term chart we're back below the cloud and testing this 100.3 sort of support area. We're here last week, and we're back to testing that again this morning. We do have these downside targets, 97, 30. So we do see the dollar index potentially going back below the 100 level, and we are bearish in this downward trend. No real upside targets to play for. These ones were met, and no clear long-term downside targets, and of course then very long-term upside targets. So still a bullish picture in the long and the medium term, but short term the dollar is seeing some selling pressure. That, of course, is filtering into the euro, looking stronger, and we're still well below the clouds here on the medium and long-term charts, but short-term we are seeing revival in price of the euro. So we do have these upside targets: 108.50, 108.97, 109.70, and 110. So the fact that we've got multiple upside targets is bullish for the euro short term, but then of course we do have multiple downside targets as well, so on the medium and long term. So short term bullish, long term bearish, and people find that picture quite hard to resolve, but that's what we're looking at. So we shouldn't be surprised to see the euro hitting some resistance sooner or later based on the longer term charts. Japanese yen, we're seeing the dollar falling away here as well, so that's a proxy for dollar weakness we're seeing here. We're below the cloud too, so just looks like another poor week for the dollar. And we've seen sterling recovering against the US dollar as well, and interestingly we're taking out that high that we saw only last week. So interestingly that we have broken out here on sterling, and so that does provide us with some short-term encouragement, really, that sterling will rise further against the dollar. We've got a target to 125.60, but of course we're still bearish on the cloud here on the medium term. Not a lot of work to do for sterling to get into bullish territory though, and that would be the first time since May last year if the lagging line can get above the cloud. And we like to see 3 days of that, really. But of course we do still have these downside targets, and in long term we do still have a lot of downside targets here as well. So no clear signs yet that we've got a medium or long term reversal of fortunes for sterling. And if we look at sterling against the euro, we see here that we see the strength coming through, but really over the last week not much change. Looking at sterling against the Swiss franc, quite poignant for me at the moment in Switzerland. We see here that again it's fairly flat, so not much change. Although sterling looking like it might just make a little bit of a recovery here. So we are just seeing sterling just seeing some strength, and against the Australian dollar we're seeing much the same thing. We haven't broken the high here yet, so interestingly on this chart we're not quite seeing that, and no clear upside targets as well. Taking a look at stock markets, the S&P 500 index just hanging around in this high 200 area, 2270, and we just really are just flat now for the whole of January. Really, we've just been really on this sort of flat plane. It is looking more and more like a consolidation pattern. So we've had the run, sideways consolidation. Will we have another run again? That doesn't show up as clearly on the weekly chart. You'll see here the consolidation we had in the second half of last year, which went on for months really, and we may be back into a similar phase here. We do have quite a few upside targets here and a couple of downside targets, but at the moment you would favour the upside. So still bullish really on all 3 time frames. And if we take a look at the Nasdaq, much the same picture. Clear upside targets here. So 2.5%, 2.5% upside. And we wouldn't be surprised to see that start to play through. We can see that Nasdaq is already running out of the consolidation phase, has had a better start to the year. The Russell 2000 index has actually been bearish the last week or so. So we're just seeing the broader US indices just coming back, and of course the big thing that everyone's asking is, when will the Dow Jones break the 20,000 level? It's not a question of if it will break, it's almost certainly will break. It's just a case of when will it happen. We're bearish below the cloud at the moment with no clear upside targets. We do have still great medium and long-term targets, but we're just seeing a little bit of a sell-off here as well. But of course, we've got that bullish Nasdaq picture, and the S&P 500 is still looking pretty good. Futures are just showing a negative start to the day, so we might just see another week of turbulence really in markets. Everyone really waiting to see what Trump's going to do. And we see here on the FTSE 100, we've turned into that bearish territory after a great run. This is really just a small retracement so far. No clear downside targets yet, and still long-term and medium-term upside targets. So short-term bearish, medium and long-term bullish. Unlike the Nasdaq and the S&P 500, we are just seeing this short-term bearishness creeping in. And if we look at the FTSE 250, we see much the same story actually. We've got downside targets here as well. So just looks like the UK market's having a little bit of a sell-off. Taking a look at the German market, we see here that we are just really just holding on to the gains, and we're still bullish here. So Germany looking pretty good. We talked about China quite often. This market has looked bearish, but we are just seeing signs of a short-term recovery in the Chinese market, and upside potential here as well. Downside target not activated yet, so the long-term picture is still bearish. The medium-term picture just hanging on to holding at some bullishness. So a pretty mixed picture there. And if we look at the Hang Seng, not much change here overnight either. Just holding on to the short-term bullish picture as well. Indian market is one that we're long-term very positive about. We've got amazing upside targets into a big secular bull trend potentially. We're not quite bullish yet on the medium-term chart, but we are just holding it on the short-term chart. So that's pretty interesting. The Australian market had a great start to the year, but we are just seeing here we're pulling back away from the cloud, so we've got some bearishness creeping in, and we have exceeded that downside target. But we've still got all these upside targets to play for, so we shouldn't expect this sell-off to be that long-lived. Brent crude, we've been talking about this bullishness just coming back above the cloud here. We've got these upside targets to the high 50s. We expect those to happen pretty soon, and then targets into the 70, 72 and 76 may well happen as we embark on the rise that we normally see at the start of the year. So still pretty bullish on all three time frames now. Brent certainly looking good. And if we look at WTI, the picture of course is very similar. We're through the cloud here a bit earlier on the short-term chart, but it looks like crude will have quite a good week. US nat gas has just really struggled. We see here this is quite a bearish, almost like head and shoulders looking pattern. On the weekly chart it's looking pretty good long term, but on the short term chart we've got these downside targets 316, 314, 313. That's a cluster really, and we have bounced at a level just above that sort of, so it may well be that we've found those targets, those levels, and we haven't quite reached them, which would be a bullish sign that we've bounced earlier than that. But we are bearish below the cloud, so we can't say that the gas chart looks bullish by any sense. We've talked about gold quite a lot recently. It's been making a pretty strong recovery in the new year. We see the bounce here on the lagging line on the cloud. We might well see some resistance here on the cloud, but interestingly, we are just continuing this march, and the 1230s level could provide some resistance. We're at 1217 at the moment, and we're back above the cloud and taking out that high that we saw last week, so that's pretty bullish. And we see all the targets coming through on the short-term chart. We've got 1237, 1228, so a pretty bullish looking picture here. And if we look at silver, quite a good proxy just for precious metals. We're just above the cloud, not making new highs like we are on gold, so not as clear, but again quite a strong bounce here on the lagging line on the long-term chart. So silver looking pretty interesting. Taking a look at the 10-year Treasury yield, we see here that we are still bullish on all three time frames. No real clear upside targets in the short term. We do have this 444 on the medium term chart. But at the moment, yields just holding that sort of 2.5% area. Taking a look at some tech stocks, obviously the Nasdaq looking pretty good. Apple bullish on all three time frames with good upside targets. Google, much the same picture here, bullish on all three time frames. And so we're just noticing that theme going right through. Amazon was down on Friday, but we're still bullish on all three time frames, and having just come through the lagging line just coming through on the medium term chart, that's pretty bullish as well. Taking a look at Microsoft, which is a Dow constituent, of course, just has been lagging a little bit. Microsoft can't quite get back into that sort of bullish phase on the 60-minute chart. This is a consolidation going on that we're seeing really across the board in a lot of stocks and indices. And so interestingly, waiting for Microsoft to make a move here. We've got upside targets of 1.3 and 1.93%, which would just put us into bullish territory. Still pretty bullish all round, really. And then last of all, looking at Facebook, similarly to Amazon, just recently crossed the cloud on the daily chart, which is bullish. Still pretty bullish on the 60-minute chart, although we've just had a few days of sideways movement. Can we break to new highs? That's the really key thing. We'll undo this downside target and increase all these upside targets. So still looking pretty good on the medium and long term, just waiting for some new upside potential here. That's it for today. Until tomorrow, happy charting. See you then.